Hey everyone! If you've been watching our channel, you know that Chris and I like to travel a lot. We usually spend about 4 to 6 months of the year traveling abroad. And then the rest of the year we spend time at home, visiting family in other parts of the country,
I'm not sure what it means, but I got my first clothespin.
and going on volunteer emergency responses to support people being evacuated from disasters like wildfires. Sometimes we have weeks to prepare for an upcoming trip, but oftentimes we'll get a phone call to go up to northern BC to support a wildfire response, and we only have a few hours before we need to get on a plane. So this is how we prepare our home base to both leave quickly and be able to travel for months at a time without having to come home in between. Chris and I travel a lot, and we've gone through the pros and cons as to whether we should or shouldn't keep a home base. And we've gone through the reasons why we decided to in a completely different video. But in this video, what I'd like to do is focus on how we prepare our home base so that we can leave it quickly and travel for months at a time. The first thing we do is we keep our home as low maintenance as possible. We live in a condo, so we don't have to worry about things like yard work. And because our building is professionally managed, things like getting our smoke alarms tested and getting our dryer vents cleaned out happens without us even having to be here. And inside our condo itself, we like to keep things pretty minimal. Sometimes I think it would be nice to have a pet, maybe even just a fish, but of course our lifestyle doesn't really allow for that. The one thing I do love, and you can tell from behind me, is I love having plants. But the plants I keep are pretty easy to maintain. I don't have any of those fancy plants that need to be watered with water exactly the size of an ice cube, that must be watered exactly every 72 hours. I don't have any plants like that. The kind of plants I have, they can be watered about once every 2 weeks, just a regular amount of water. They're not too picky on the amount. That really works. But who looks after our plants when we're away? I used to ask friends to come in and check on our place and take care of our plants while we were traveling. But because we're away so much, it just didn't seem really fair to keep asking them to do that. So instead, I asked the person who works in our building if they would mind coming in and taking care of our place, and I would pay them to do that. And they said yes, and they've been doing that for a few years, and it's been working out very well. I also keep all of our important documents in one place. Now, of course, we travel with our passports, but not all of our important documents come with us. And if something were to ever happen to our place, or I were to need one of those important documents while we were traveling, it's easy enough for me to ask a neighbor or a friend to come in and grab those documents for us. Now, if things were scattered everywhere and I wasn't sure where things were, that would be a lot harder. But because I keep everything in one location, then it's easy enough for me to ask the neighbor to just come in and grab what I need. Chris and I also use an alarm system to remotely monitor our place while we're away. And this makes it really easy for us to tell when our plants are getting watered or if our electricity were to happen to go out. Having this system really gives us a lot of peace of mind so we know what's going on in our home while we're away. Another great benefit about living in a condo and traveling a lot is not having to worry about climate control. So because we live in a condo and because we live in Vancouver, which is a pretty temperate area, we don't have to worry about heating our place in the winter and cooling it in the summer. So for example, in the winter months, our place doesn't freeze just because we don't have the heat on. And so we're able to leave the heat off while we're traveling. And then in the summertime, we don't have to worry about things like air conditioning. We do keep our windows closed while we're traveling, and so sometimes when we come back, our place is pretty stale. But usually we open the windows and within a couple of hours, the place feels good again. Because we're volunteer emergency management responders, sometimes our travel isn't so much slow as it is fast and unexpected. And so we always have to be ready to freeze food. We've gone out and bought a week's worth of beautiful, fresh groceries, only to get a call immediately after we get home asking us if we can go on an emergency response and get on a plane within the next few hours. We don't want our fresh food to go to waste, so we freeze it. And I've learned over the last few years that you can freeze pretty much every food, even foods that I didn't think were possible to freeze. You just need to know how to prepare it beforehand and then have enough room in your freezer to store it. So we prepare by always keeping room in our freezer for such things. And we just have a regular freezer under our fridge. Now obviously it's not one of those super big deep freezers, but it's big enough for the two of us. And one thing that I really love about having frozen food is that when we get home after a long trip, we already have food in the freezer that's ready to go, and we don't have to run to the grocery store. When we get home, we don't always unpack right away. So we keep our home-based toiletries separate from our travel toiletries. It is really nice to get home after a long flight and jump in the shower and have my soaps and other toiletries ready to go without having to unpack first. If I have enough notice before our next trip, then the other thing I like to do before we leave is I like to clean. Now, I don't like to do a huge deep clean because one thing I've noticed is that when I get home from a trip, no matter how well I've cleaned the place before we've left, there's always kind of this layer of dust over everything. And so I don't want to have to dust before I leave and then have to redust right before I get home. But I do like our home to feel nice and ready for us when we get back, and so I do things like change the sheets before we go. And the last tip I have for you today, and probably the most important one on how to prepare your home base for travel, is to check to make sure that you have the right insurance. Some insurances don't cover you for long trips or have the coverage that you think that they do. So always make sure that you chat with your insurance company and make sure they understand what you're trying to do and that you have the right coverage for it. When we were in Argentina last year, I actually got a notice from our insurance company saying that our terms and conditions were changing. And I found out what that meant was that we were going to no longer be able to leave our home for more than 7 days and still expect the same level of coverage. And I thought, oh my gosh, 7 days, that is not enough. We're gone for many months. 7 days isn't going to cut it. And when I talked to the insurance company, they said that even having friends come in and all of that stuff, none of that was enough. The second you leave your home for more than 7 days, your coverage changes. So right away, thank goodness for internet calling. I was on the phone from Argentina calling insurance companies in Canada, trying to find one that was going to give us the right coverage. And so from Argentina, I was changing our insurance company and making sure that we had the right coverage and that it was available to us when our current coverage expired. And so those are some of our tips and tricks for how we prepare our home base for travel, both for leaving quickly and for traveling for months at a time. Now, if you want to know why we keep a home base at all, check out this video here. And we'll see you in our next video.